When Jungkook blatantly ignored Taehyung during a live stage performance, the air turned heavy, and armies couldn't believe what they were witnessing. The lights exploded in a cascade of golden sparks, raining down over the thunderous crowd that chanted BTS's name like a prayer. But in the heart of the spectacle, where the music pulsed like a second heartbeat, something was off. Taehyung had extended his hand open, subtle, hopeful, toward Jungkook during the bridge of their duet. It was the moment fans knew by heart, the one where the two would usually exchange a glance, a smile, maybe even a teasing nudge that would make the crowd erupt. But this time, Jungkook walked right past him. The silence that followed was louder than the music. It wasn't scripted. It wasn't staged. Armies had seen enough to know the difference. Cameras captured it. The flicker of confusion on Taehyung's face. The stiffness in Jungkook's shoulders. The way the stage lights suddenly felt colder, despite the fire raining above them. Jimin, caught between them, darted his eyes from one to the other, his jaw visibly tightening, even while his voice didn't miss a note. Namjoon hesitated a breath, too long before coming in on cue, his leader instincts triggered by a disruption he couldn't ignore. Backstage, the tension was no less thick. The green room, once buzzing with stylists and laughter, now felt like a vacuum. Taehyung sat on the leather couch, hunched forward, a towel draped over his neck, fingers locked together and eyes locked on the floor. He hadn't said a word since they stepped off stage. Jungkook stood by the vanity, wiping off makeup in slow, methodical strokes, as if the routine could erase what had just happened. No one wanted to be the first to break the silence. It was Jin, ever the older brother even in his absence, who called through speakerphone from the military dorms, voice low but firm. What the hell just happened? No one answered, because even they didn't fully know. It had started weeks before. Rumors swirled like smoke through corridors of rehearsals and meetings. Taehyung being late, Jungkook being distant, whispers of disagreements over creative direction, song lyrics, even who would sing which line. At first, it was easy to chalk it up to pressure. The group was preparing for their biggest performance in nearly a year. A massive global broadcast, and the weight of representing their country, their fans, and themselves was unbearable. But the fractures ran deeper. Jungkook had always looked up to Taehyung. Their bond had been spontaneous, playful, sometimes reckless but always real. They shared secrets at 3 a.m., matching rings, tattoos that meant more than aesthetics. But something shifted. Maybe it was fame, maybe it was fear, or maybe it was something neither of them had the words to say aloud. The night before the performance, Jungkook had left rehearsal early. He didn't say goodbye. Taehyung had watched him leave from the rooftop of the studio, alone, smoke from his coffee curling around him like unanswered questions. When the door closed behind Jungkook, Taehyung had whispered, more to himself than anyone, "So this is how it ends." They hadn't spoken since. On stage, that silence transformed into spectacle, and the world noticed. Fans on Twitter dissected every frame, every micro-expression, syncing it with old performances where laughter and harmony once flowed. The hashtags were immediate. Number Taekook, number what happened on stage, number Jungkook ignored Taehyung. Hybe, ever prepared, issued a vague statement about technical miscommunication, but armies weren't buying it. They knew their boys. They could feel the distance. Later that week, in a rare V Live, Taehyung sat alone, wearing a plain hoodie, eyes tired. "Sometimes," he said quietly, fingers fidgeting with his sleeves, "people drift, even when they don't want to, even when they still care." He didn't name Jungkook. He didn't have to. Jungkook, on the other hand, stayed quiet, silent on Weverse, absent from Instagram, only appearing briefly in a dance rehearsal clip where he looked sharper than ever, movements perfect but devoid of his usual fire. His silence wasn't just avoidance, it was defense. Because if he spoke, he wasn't sure what might spill out. It wasn't about hate. It wasn't betrayal. It was pain. Unspoken, unresolved, layered in years of closeness and dependency that had finally curdled into something too raw to look at. Jimin tried to mediate. At one point, he invited both to his apartment for dinner. Jungkook showed up. Taehyung didn't. Another time, it was reversed. Hobi sent a group message, pleading in his usual sunshine-laced way for them to, please, just talk. He was met with red receipts and no replies. Yoongi, ever the realist, simply said to Namjoon one night, "Some things, they need to break before they can be rebuilt." The comeback loomed. A press conference approached, and fans waited not just for music, but for a sign. A smile, a glance. Anything to suggest the chasm hadn't become permanent. When the boys stood in front of the cameras again, it was like watching a fragile performance within a performance. Taehyung answered questions with grace, Jungkook with professionalism. But the spark between them, the one that made fans believe in magic, was gone. It returned unexpectedly. Weeks later, during an encore performance in Busan, Jungkook looked across the stage. Taehyung wasn't looking at him. He was laughing at something Jin had said in a pre-recorded message. That laugh, genuine, carefree, familiar, pierced through Jungkook like lightning. And he moved. Just a step. Just enough to close the space between them. Taehyung looked up, caught off guard. For a second, they locked eyes. And this time, Jungkook didn't look away. Not a smile, not an embrace, just a nod. But it was real. The crowd didn't scream. They exhaled like the ending of a song they didn't know they'd been holding their breath through. Because sometimes, silence isn't a wall. It's a bridge, waiting to be crossed. The night air in Busan had shifted not because of the temperature, but because of the weight of unspoken history that hung between two figures standing under the harsh spotlights. Even after Jungkook gave that subtle, barely there nod to Taehyung, the world didn't immediately right itself. That brief glance wasn't a resolution, it was an opening. And openings, however small, are where stories begin again. Taehyung's eyes have followed Jungkook as the performance ended, his chest rising and falling with something heavier than exhaustion. He had smiled afterward, just enough to mask the tremor in his lips. Jimin had noticed. Of course he did. Jimin always noticed, but he didn't press. Instead, as they walked off stage, he placed a warm hand on Taehyung's back, not to guide him, not to push, but to remind him that someone was still standing beside him. In the dressing room, the atmosphere was calmer than the last time they were all in one together. But that didn't mean it was light. Laughter came in waves, Hoseok teasing Yoongi about his stiff shoulders, Namjoon recounting how he nearly tripped over a stage monitor. Jimin threw a grape in the air and caught it with his mouth, earning soft cheers. But Jungkook and Taehyung didn't speak. Not to each other. Not yet. Taehyung sat by the mirror, wiping the stage glitter from his jawline, then paused and stared at his own reflection. He studied the subtle weariness beneath his eyes. He looked older somehow, though the same. Familiar but weathered. Behind him, Jungkook was tying his hair up into a low bun. Not speaking, not looking. But Taehyung could feel it. Feel the tension that wrapped around them like an invisible thread neither dared to tug. Later that night, the hotel corridors were quiet. Taehyung wandered them barefoot, hoodie over his head, passing by doors that felt like sealed vaults. His mind was cluttered, his heart tired. He stopped in front of a vending machine and stared blankly at the choices. Not because he wanted something to eat, but because he needed to pretend he had a reason to be standing there. Footsteps echoed behind him. He didn't turn. Didn't have to. "I didn't mean to hurt you." Jungkook's voice wasn't loud, but it carried like thunder in Taehyung's chest. The silence that followed was brutal. "You didn't have to ignore me like that," Taehyung said at last, voice hoarse. Jungkook stepped closer, now just beside him, their shoulders almost brushing. "I didn't plan it. I panicked." Taehyung laughed bitterly, without humor. "You panicked? In front of millions?" "I wasn't angry at you," Jungkook said. "I was angry at myself, for not being able to talk to you." "Then why didn't you?" "Because I didn't know how to say it." "Say what?" Taehyung turned to him, eyes searching. "That we've changed? That we don't trust each other like we used to? That maybe we're not even friends anymore?" Jungkook flinched, as if every word was a cut. "Don't say that." "Then what do I say, Jungkook? What do you want from me?" "I want to find our way back," Jungkook said, voice breaking for the first time in weeks. "But I don't know if you even want that anymore." The hallway was too still. Taehyung looked away, fingers clenched at his sides. "I do. God, I do. But it hurts. It hurts more than I thought it would." They stood there, surrounded by silence, the hum of the vending machine filling the gaps between them. Finally, Jungkook whispered, "Do you remember the rooftop in Seoul? Before our first big tour?" Taehyung's eyes closed. We made that stupid pact to never let anything come between us. Taehyung exhaled. We were so young. We're still those people, Jungkook said, stepping in front of him now, finally facing him. Just heavier, but still us. Taehyung searched his face, unsure whether to believe him. But Jungkook's eyes weren't lying. They never did. He nodded. Then prove it. And Jungkook did. Not with grand apologies, not with dramatic gestures, but in the small things. He started showing up again, not just physically, but emotionally. He lingered after rehearsals, asked Taehyung to grab coffee, started teasing him on stage the way he used to, just enough to let the audience feel the warmth again, without it feeling forced. It was tentative, fragile, but real, and Taehyung began to respond not immediately, not all at once but gradually. He smiled more when Jungkook was near. He let his arm linger around his shoulders a little longer. One night, during an interview, when asked who in the group he trusted most with a secret, he answered without hesitation. Jungkook, he said, and glanced sideways. Even if we've been through it. Fans noticed. They always noticed. The healing was visible, like watching a wound close in slow motion. But what fans didn't see what happened behind the curtain was even more sacred. They talked deeply, honestly, about fame, about fear, about how much pressure they felt to always be perfect for each other, for the group, for armies. Taehyung admitted he often felt misunderstood. Jungkook admitted he often felt too guarded. They laughed about their past, cried over the moments they didn't know how to fix, and promised not to let silence destroy them again. The tension that had once been ice slowly melted, and during one particular rehearsal, when the same choreography sequence that had once torn them apart played again, Jungkook didn't hesitate. He turned, extended his hand, and this time, Taehyung took it. It wasn't just a performance, it was a reclaiming. Months later, in a documentary filmed quietly by the crew, they sat beside each other in a dark studio, a guitar resting against the wall, cups of coffee between them. You ever think about what would have happened if we never talked that night? Taehyung asked. Jungkook chuckled. We'd be two miserable guys with matching stage outfits and nothing to say. I'm glad we talked. Me too. The camera panned out as they bumped shoulders, playful again. The weight of the past still present, but no longer suffocating. Growth, after all, doesn't mean forgetting what broke you. It means choosing, again and again, to repair it with intention. And for Jungkook and Taehyung, silence no longer stood between them. It had become something they walked through together. Under the flickering dim of studio lights, the room felt warmer than usual, not from heat, but from something else that had settled between Taehyung and Jungkook. It was no longer tension, not quite comfort either, but a delicate in-between, like dawn after an endless night. The kind of silence that spoke softly, not suffocating, but gentle, laced with a fragile understanding of two people who had seen the worst of each other and still decided to stay. Jungkook sat on the floor, back against the wall, strumming a quiet melody on the acoustic guitar beside him. His hair fell into his eyes, and he didn't bother to push it away. Taehyung was sprawled on the couch, one leg draped over the other, a sketchbook on his lap he hadn't touched for over 10 minutes. Instead, he just watched Jungkook, not in the way someone stares, but in the way someone guards something precious, quietly, protectively. They didn't speak at first, and they didn't need to. The music filled the space, occasional wrong notes, only making it more honest. You've gotten better, Taehyung murmured, voice low. Jungkook's fingers slowed. I've been practicing. For yourself? For you. Taehyung blinked, heart stumbling. Why? Jungkook looked up. Because I remembered how much you liked when I played. I used to do it all the time around you. You stopped. You stopped sitting next to me when I did. The words weren't accusatory, but they landed with weight. Taehyung set the sketchbook aside and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I didn't stop because I stopped caring, he said. I stopped because I didn't know how to be near you without hurting. Jungkook nodded, strumming softer. I know. They were older now. Not just in years, but in spirit. The kind of aging that didn't show on the skin but ran deeper in glances, in breaths held too long, in moments avoided because they carried too much memory. But they were trying, in the only ways they knew how. Do you ever think we should have said more back then? Taehyung asked. Jungkook thought for a moment. I think we said what we could, with the emotional vocabulary we had. But now we can do better. Taehyung nodded slowly, reaching for the coffee cup beside him and taking a sip. It had gone cold. Jungkook set the guitar down and stood. He walked over and sat beside Taehyung on the couch, leaving only a whisper of space between them. Their arms brushed. Neither moved away. I used to think if we fought, it meant something was broken, Jungkook said. But maybe it just meant something needed to be understood. Taehyung exhaled shakily. We've never been good at talking, just feeling. But feelings without words become assumptions, Jungkook added. And assumptions built our walls. Taehyung turned toward him, eyes softer now. Then let's tear them down. The door creaked open, and Jimin peeked in, surprised to find them sitting so close and speaking so quietly. He didn't step in, just smiled, relief blooming across his face, and whispered, "Finally." They both chuckled, breaking the heaviness. The next few weeks passed in ways only people in recovery could understand. Not dramatic, not sudden, just slow reintroduction. Taehyung and Jungkook began rehearsing side by side again, no longer moving as if their bodies remembered choreography, but as if their souls were sinking once more. Laughter found its way back into the green rooms. Even the stylists noticed. One whispered to another during makeup touch-up, "They're back, aren't they?" And the other nodded with a grin. It culminated in a fan meeting. Taehyung stood with a mic in hand, the lights warm on his skin, thousands of armies waiting in breathless silence. He glanced at Jungkook, standing across the stage. This time, when he held out his hand, it wasn't tentative, and Jungkook took it. The crowd erupted, but they didn't let go. "I know some of you noticed things were strange between us," Taehyung said, voice slightly shaking. "And you were right. We've been figuring things out, and it hasn't been easy." Jungkook stepped closer, his voice firmer. "But we never stopped caring. We never stopped wanting to come back. To each other. To you." Taehyung smiled through the shimmer in his eyes. "Thank you for waiting." After the meeting, they sat on the rooftop of the venue, legs dangling over the edge, the city buzzing beneath them. Jungkook pulled out his phone and showed Taehyung a note. "I wrote this after that night. The one where I ignored you." Taehyung hesitated, then read it. The words were raw. Apologies tangled with regret. A sentence caught his breath. Asterisk. "I didn't know how to be near you without wanting more, and I hated myself for it." Asterisk. Taehyung turned to him. "More?" Jungkook didn't look away. "I didn't just miss you. I loved you." The words were the loudest thing spoken between them in years. Taehyung's lips parted, but nothing came at first. Then, slowly, with the softness of dawn, he said, "You think I didn't?" Jungkook's chest rose in shock. Taehyung smiled sadly. "We're idiots." Jungkook laughed. "But we're here." Taehyung leaned his head on Jungkook's shoulder. "Yeah, we're here." And they stayed like that. The city alive beneath them. The stars witnessing two people who found their way through silence, pain, misunderstanding, and chose each other anyway. Because some stories aren't about never breaking. They're about breaking, and then holding on tighter, under the hush of the midnight sky, with the breeze curling around them like the breath of old memories. Jungkook and Taehyung sat side by side on that rooftop, as if the world beneath them no longer held the same weight. The hum of the city was distant, softened by altitude and presence. And neither of them wanted to be the first to move. It had taken too long to get here. Too much silence, too much pretending. But now, everything felt clearer in the dark. Jungkook could still hear the echo of his own confession, the trembling honesty of it still vibrating in his chest. "I loved you." The words hadn't been planned. They had spilled out like a wave crashing over the last barrier between them. And Taehyung's response, "You think I didn't?" wasn't just an answer. It was the final key to a lock they both had forgotten how to open. Taehyung's head was still resting on his shoulder, unmoving, unafraid. Jungkook tilted his head slightly, just enough to let his cheek graze the top of Taehyung's hair. He inhaled deeply, eyes closing, allowing himself for once to feel it fully. The warmth, the stillness, the forgiveness, and the decades worth of something deeper. Neither of them had known how to name until now. "I used to lie awake," Jungkook said quietly, voice half buried by the wind. "After tours, after shows, wondering if I imagined it all." Taehyung shifted only slightly, listening. "You'd smile at me," Jungkook continued, "and I'd think, Maybe I'm reading too much into it. Maybe he's just kind. Maybe this is just who he is with everyone. You always thought that? Taehyung's voice was low, tinged with surprise and sadness. Jungkook nodded. I was scared to believe it was more. Because, what if I did? And I was wrong? What if it ruined everything? Taehyung turned to him now, lifting his head from Jungkook's shoulder, eyes catching the city's glow and reflecting it. You weren't wrong. There was a pause so fragile. It felt like it could break if either of them exhaled too quickly. I loved you, Taehyung said, firmer this time. I probably still do. Jungkook swallowed hard. Then why didn't you ever say anything? Because you were always a step ahead of me, Taehyung admitted, voice raw. Always shining, always moving forward. I thought, if I reached out, I'd slow you down. Or worse, I'd lose you. Jungkook reached for his hand gently. Their fingers touched, interlocked like puzzle pieces that had finally remembered how to fit. You never would have lost me. Then why did you pull away? Because I saw the distance growing, and I didn't know how to fix it. I thought maybe if I stepped back, maybe it would give you space to come to me. But I thought you didn't want me near you anymore. Taehyung whispered, his voice breaking. That maybe you were tired of me. Jungkook's heart cracked. He turned fully to face him, hands now cupping Taehyung's cheeks. I was never tired of you. I missed you every time you weren't beside me. Even when you were standing right there on stage. I missed you. And for the first time in years, the tears came. Taehyung's eyes shimmered, and he let them fall. Not out of sadness, but out of release. Out of relief. Jungkook didn't look away. He let the moment stretch between them, holding it, honoring it. Can we go back? Taehyung asked softly. Not to who we were, but to what we could have been. Jungkook smiled through his own wet lashes. I don't want to go back. I want to start from here. They stayed on that rooftop until dawn kissed the horizon, the sky slowly bleeding from ink to rose. They didn't talk much more, just sat close, hand in hand, letting the silence now carry a different weight. A gentler one, a shared one. In the following days, the shift between them was undeniable. Not just to each other, but to everyone around them. During rehearsals, their synchronization returned not just physically but emotionally. They moved like they were breathing together again. Taehyung's laughter, once a guarded thing, came freely around Jungkook. Jungkook, once quietly distant, now lingered longer near Taehyung, his smiles returning with that sparkle that had been missing for far too long. Armies noticed. Fan cams began capturing the small glances, the returning shoulder touches, the way Taehyung leaned into Jungkook during interviews again. During one concert, as Jungkook sang a verse alone, Taehyung reached out and gently fixed the mic on his collar, brushing a strand of Jungkook's hair behind his ear as he did. The gesture was tender, unspoken, but it sent the crowd into a stunned silence before an eruption of screams. One fan tweeted, "That wasn't performance. That was love." But more than the stage, it was the private moments that mattered. Late nights in the dorm kitchen, whispering over shared ramen. Studio sessions where Jungkook would pause recording just to ask if Taehyung wanted to duet on a verse. Quiet mornings where Taehyung would bring coffee into Jungkook's room and sit in silence as the sun rose. The love they once feared was a risk had become their anchor. Even the members began to treat them differently, not with caution, but with quiet support. Namjoon, always observant, once left 2 cups of warm tea outside their door during a long night in the studio. Jimin, beaming one morning, simply said, "It's good to have you both back." And it was true. Together, they were home. The most powerful moment came during a live performance for a global audience, millions watching. As the final chorus began, the lights dimmed, and Jungkook and Taehyung stood center stage. Taehyung reached out, not subtly this time, but openly, his hand extended in front of thousands. Jungkook didn't hesitate. He took it, not just as part of choreography, not just for the fans, but for them. Their fingers locked, and Jungkook pulled Taehyung close, pressing his forehead gently to his. The music faded, and there was a beat, 1 second of silence, where no one in the crowd made a sound. Then thunderous applause erupted. Later, in a private moment captured in the behind-the-scenes documentary, Jungkook spoke into the camera, his voice soft. "We thought we had to be perfect to deserve each other. But love isn't perfect. It's patient, and it waits, even in silence." Taehyung's voice came in next, recorded in a separate clip. We broke, but not apart. We broke open, and in the space between, we found something more honest than we'd ever known. And as the screen faded to black, a single message appeared.
Some silences are meant to be broken. Others are meant to be held together. And they held it. Together, it wasn't a sudden shift, nor an announcement, and certainly not a declaration posted under blinding stage lights. It was something quieter, more sacred. The way Jungkook stood closer to Taehyung during rehearsals, not because the choreography required it, but because proximity now felt like safety. The way Taehyung would glance at Jungkook before each take, confirming with his eyes what words didn't need to say, that he was here, that he wasn't going anywhere this time. It was how their laughter, once stifled by misunderstandings, now flowed freely again, even if only in the late hours of shared studio nights or whispered jokes backstage. They hadn't spoken to the world about what happened. They didn't need to. They didn't owe the crowd an explanation for the silence between them, nor for the reconciliation. It was all there, in the glances, the brush of fingers, the unspoken devotion stitched into their presence beside one another. Armies didn't need subtitles for the language they spoke. They could see it. They could feel it. One morning, weeks after their rooftop conversation, Jungkook arrived at the studio first. He hadn't slept well. The night had been long, full of dreams that bled into memory, some sharp, others soft, all of them starring Taehyung. He didn't tell anyone. He didn't need to. He poured coffee into 2 mugs out of instinct and left one beside the second mic stand. When Taehyung entered nearly 40 minutes later, hoodie half over his eyes, he didn't question it. He walked to the mug, smiled faintly and took a sip. Their eyes met. It was enough. Later that day, they recorded a track together. It wasn't planned. The producer had stepped out for a phone call. The others were scattered across different rooms, and Jungkook had been humming a melody under his breath, something tender, haunting, raw. Taehyung recognized it immediately, not because he'd heard it before, but because it felt familiar in a way that only something deeply true can feel. Without a word, he sat beside Jungkook at the piano and started harmonizing, their voices folding over each other like silk in water. By the time the producer returned, he froze in the doorway, watching 2 souls pour themselves into a melody that hadn't existed an hour before. He didn't interrupt. He hit record and let it breathe. The song would never be released. Not officially. But every member in the group had a copy. So did the CEO. So did one particularly devoted sound engineer who, when asked about the moment years later, simply said, "It was like watching forgiveness being sung into the air." The track lived in their archive, untitled, unnamed. Internally, it became known as the silence between us. Time moved forward as it always does. Seasons changed. Hair colors came and went. Promotions rolled out. Comebacks stirred frenzy, but something had settled between Taehyung and Jungkook, a rhythm, a calm, a knowing. They didn't need to perform closeness for the cameras anymore. They didn't need to manufacture nostalgia. What they had now wasn't the recklessness of youth or the sweetness of first affection. It was steadier, older, earned. There were still arguments, misunderstandings, frustrations, but now they talked. They stayed in the room. They didn't retreat behind pride or fear. One night during a particularly stressful shoot overseas, Taehyung snapped at Jungkook for spacing out during a take. Jungkook, raw from exhaustion and pressure, nearly walked off. But instead of storming away, he exhaled, clenched his fists, and stayed. "We're not doing that again," he said quietly. "Not you walking one way and me walking the other." Taehyung blinked, surprised at the restraint in Jungkook's voice. "I wasn't." Jungkook stepped forward. "Even if you were, I'm here." And Taehyung, heart pulled tight, nodded. They finished the shoot side by side. That night, they sat by the hotel pool, feet in cold water, watching the lights ripple across the surface. Taehyung leaned his head back against the lounge chair. "Sometimes I think about how close we were to losing this." Jungkook hummed, "Me too." "I used to think we were unbreakable," Taehyung admitted. "That nothing could touch us, that we were too strong to fall apart." And then we broke anyway. Yeah. Silence stretched. But maybe, Jungkook said, voice thoughtful, we needed to. Taehyung turned to him. Maybe we needed to shatter a little, Jungkook continued, so we could learn how to build something better. Taehyung smiled, not big, just enough, something stronger. Jungkook met his gaze, something honest. The pool lights flickered, the water dancing beneath the moon. In that quiet, Taehyung slipped his hand over Jungkook's again. No fanfare, no announcement, just presence, a promise in the shape of a gesture. Back in Seoul, their dynamic became the heartbeat of a new era. During a radio interview, when asked about which member they turned to when everything got too heavy, Jungkook answered, Taehyung. No hesitation, no grin to soften it, just truth. The host had laughed nervously, teasing, oh, still that close, huh? And Jungkook had simply nodded. Closer. Taehyung, sitting beside him, rested his hand over Jungkook's knee beneath the table, hidden from the cameras. A grounding touch. Later, when fans watched the clip, they noticed the smallest of glances between them. A half-second where they looked at each other and said everything without speaking. It became a gif, it became a moment, but for them, it was just a Tuesday. The comeback was a success. The album broke records, the performances were thunderous, but behind it all was the quiet anchor that kept everything steady, Jungkook and Taehyung moving in sync again, breathing in time, choosing each other again and again. Their bond didn't just survive, it evolved. One night during a documentary shoot, the producer asked them offhandedly, "What do you think the world sees when they look at you two now?" Jungkook looked at Taehyung, Taehyung looked at Jungkook. A story, Taehyung answered, but not all of it. Just the part that shows on camera, Jungkook added. What's the part they don't see? The producer asked. Jungkook paused. Then he said softly, the part where we had to fight for each other, quietly, in all the moments no one noticed. The camera kept rolling, even as they both looked away toward the skyline, toward the future, toward something unnamed but understood. Because in the end, what they built wasn't a performance. It was a home. And it didn't need applause to exist. The following weeks passed in a quiet rhythm, as if time itself had agreed to slow down for them. Their days were filled with rehearsals, interviews, flights, stages. But for the first time in what felt like years, everything didn't feel like it was collapsing beneath the pressure. The stage was no longer a battlefield where emotions were suppressed and movements were sharp with unspoken pain. Instead, it became a place of return. Each performance a reconciliation. Each shared look between Jungkook and Taehyung, a reaffirmation that they had come back to each other. One evening, after a particularly long day of filming, the group found themselves in a dressing room that still smelled faintly of hairspray and sweat. Makeup wipes scattered across the counter, hoodies pulled over heads, laughter fading into sighs. The others filtered out slowly, too tired to talk much more. Taehyung lingered. Jungkook was seated on the floor with his back against the mirror, legs stretched, a half-empty water bottle resting loosely in his hand. His eyes were on the ceiling, unfocused. When Taehyung didn't leave, Jungkook glanced over, something like a smile flickering at the corners of his lips. "Don't tell me you're waiting for me again," Jungkook murmured. Taehyung sat down beside him without answering. The room fell silent. Jungkook spoke first. "Do you ever wonder how close we came to losing all this?" "All the time," Taehyung admitted. "But maybe we had to almost lose it. Maybe that's what made us understand what it meant." Jungkook turned his head to look at him, eyes dark and soft. "I used to think it was weakness, how much you affected me. And now I know it was the strongest thing I've ever felt." Taehyung looked down at his hands, tracing the veins along his fingers. "There were moments I hated you," he confessed, voice low. "Not because I stopped loving you, but because loving you hurt too much." Jungkook's breath caught. "I know. I blamed you for things that weren't yours. expected you to read things I was too afraid to say. I punished you with distance because I didn't know how to ask you to come closer. Jungkook reached out then, slowly, deliberately. His hand closed around Taehyung's, warm, steady. I'm not going anywhere now. Taehyung nodded, his throat tightening. Good, because I need you to stay. Their hands remained entwined as the lights above them dimmed to night mode. The city buzzed beyond the windows, but in that room, nothing moved except the understanding between them. There were no cameras, no stage, no audience, just two boys who had grown into men, sitting in the aftermath of almost losing something sacred. Later, as they walked down the quiet hallway of the venue, the hum of vending machines and distant murmurs of staff filled the space. Taehyung paused near the exit, his hand resting on the glass door. What if this all ends someday? He asked, eyes on the darkness beyond. It will, Jungkook said gently, but not us. Taehyung looked at him. Stages end, lights fade, but the part of me that's yours doesn't need an audience to exist. And in that hallway, Jungkook stepped closer, brushing a hand over Taehyung's cheek, letting his thumb trace the line of his jaw, grounding him in this truth. I don't love you because the world watches. I love you in spite of it. Taehyung closed his eyes. You say that so easily now, he whispered. Because I should have said it years ago. They stood there for a long time before walking out together into the night, hoodies pulled over their heads, anonymity cloaking them like a secret. They didn't speak much on the way back. They didn't need to. When they reached the hotel, they ended up in Jungkook's room. The TV played some muted late-night program, flickering light casting strange patterns on the walls. Taehyung sat cross-legged at the foot of the bed, while Jungkook sat near the window, staring out at the skyline. Taehyung finally asked, "What scared you the most back when we were okay?" Jungkook didn't look away from the window. That you get used to being without me. Taehyung's breath hitched. I almost did. But you didn't, Jungkook replied, finally turning to face him. You stayed angry, hurt, distant, but you never stopped caring. I saw it in your eyes even when you wouldn't speak. I hated that you could still read me, Taehyung said, voice cracking, when I tried so hard to shut you out. I know. Silence stretched between them, heavy, necessary. I'm sorry, Taehyung said finally, barely above a whisper. So am I, Jungkook replied. And just like that, something cracked open between them, something that had long been locked tight. Jungkook stood and crossed the room, stopping in front of Taehyung, who looked up at him with every emotion naked on his face. Jungkook leaned down slowly, so close their foreheads touched. They didn't kiss. They just breathed the same air for a moment longer than usual, letting their hearts sink again, letting the distance between past and present collapse. That night, Taehyung fell asleep in Jungkook's bed for the first time in years. No words, just presence, just skin brushing skin beneath the sheets. Jungkook didn't reach for more, didn't try to rewrite what had been with urgency. He simply curled around Taehyung, resting his chin on his shoulder, anchoring them both. And Taehyung didn't flinch. He pressed closer. When morning came, there was no panic, no regret, only the warmth of soft light creeping through the curtains and the steady rise and fall of Jungkook's chest beneath his cheek. Taehyung whispered, I dreamt about this, and Jungkook, half asleep, replied, so did I. The days that followed were filled with motion, tour, shoots, appearances, but through it all, the space between them remained filled with clarity instead of confusion. They didn't hide anymore. They didn't explain either. They simply allowed the world to see what was already obvious in their smiles, in their comfort, in the way they gravitated toward each other like magnets that had once been reversed but now pulled closer with undeniable force. One day, during a fan event, a little girl stepped up to the mic, cheeks red with nerves. Her voice trembled when she asked, "Do you two still love each other?" The room fell completely still. Taehyung glanced at Jungkook. Jungkook didn't smile. He didn't deflect. He reached for Taehyung's hand and held it in full view of thousands of fans and cameras. "Always," Jungkook said simply. Taehyung's smile was soft. It just took us a while to figure out what that meant. The crowd roared, but the two of them didn't break their gaze. That night, as they walked backstage hand in hand, Jungkook whispered, "That question was brave." "So was your answer," Taehyung replied. Jungkook leaned closer. "So is this." Taehyung stopped walking and turned to him fully. "This? Us?" Taehyung's eyes shimmered. "Yeah," he said, "but I'm not scared anymore." Neither of them were. And as the curtains fell and the lights dimmed, and the world outside continued spinning, Jungkook and Taehyung stood steady in the quiet aftermath. Not broken, not lost, but found. Together, always. The hotel room was quiet again, but not in the way it used to be. It was a quiet made of warmth and acceptance, not avoidance, not fear. Outside the window, the sky was the color of peach and coral as the sun began to rise over Seoul, casting a soft golden hue across the sheets tangled at their feet. Jungkook lay on his back, one arm draped loosely over Taehyung's waist, the other resting above his head on the pillow, fingers twitching slightly in the half-dream state he hadn't left yet. Taehyung stirred beside him, eyes slowly blinking open to find Jungkook already watching him. He blinked once. "You're starring." Jungkook's voice was husky with sleep. "I am." Taehyung buried his face into the pillow with a groan. "Don't. I look terrible when I first wake up." "You don't," Jungkook said, inching closer. "You look real." Taehyung peeked through his fringe, unable to fight the soft tug of a smile on his lips. "You always say things like that in the morning." "Because it's when you're most honest," Jungkook whispered, brushing a strand of hair behind Taehyung's ear. "And when I'm brave enough to say what I've always felt." Taehyung leaned into the touch. "Then say something brave." Jungkook breathed out slowly. "I never stopped wanting this." Neither of them spoke for a moment after that. The morning sun warmed the sheets, their skin, the silence between them. Taehyung reached up and traced his finger along the curve of Jungkook's cheekbone, down the line of his jaw, memorizing him in the daylight. As if the years hadn't already carved Jungkook's face into the deepest parts of him. "I was always afraid," Taehyung said, "that wanting this would ruin everything." Jungkook nodded. "Me too." "But now," Jungkook said, pulling him closer, "I want it even if it's messy, even if it's hard, even if the world doesn't understand." Taehyung closed his eyes, letting the words settle inside him like truth finally allowed to be spoken aloud. "I want it too." Later that day, they moved through the halls of the company building like any other day, stylists greeting them, managers reminding them of schedules, the familiar smell of coffee wafting from the break room. But their shoulders brushed as they walked, fingers occasionally brushing too, and though they didn't hold hands, it was clear something had shifted. They no longer walked beside each other out of obligation. They walked as a choice. During rehearsals, they laughed again, loudly, freely. Taehyung teased Jungkook about his footwork. Jungkook retaliated with a smirk and a perfectly timed spin that made the choreographer clap her hands. Jimin raised an eyebrow from across the room and mouthed, "Finally," toward Namjoon, who only nodded with a small smile. At lunch, they shared a plate, unconcerned about the way the staff looked at them. At the photo shoot that followed, their chemistry was impossible to ignore. The photographer stopped halfway through and muttered, "You two are making this unfairly easy." Jungkook glanced at Taehyung and smiled. "We're just being ourselves." That night they returned to the dorm. The others had gone out, leaving the place quiet. Taehyung kicked off his shoes, dropped onto the couch and groaned. "Remind me why I agreed to shoot for 7 hours straight." "Because you like the way I look in black," Jungkook teased, following him with 2 water bottles in hand. "I hate how right you are," Taehyung muttered, taking the water. They sat in silence for a while, the TV playing low in the background. Jungkook leaned his head on Taehyung's shoulder, his hand resting palm up on the cushion between them. Taehyung slowly placed his fingers over it. "I've been writing again," Jungkook said quietly. "Music." "Yeah, and other things." Taehyung turned his head. "What kind of other things?" Jungkook's eyes met his. "Letters to you." Taehyung's breath caught. "I started writing them when we weren't speaking." Jungkook continued. "When I didn't know if I'd ever get the chance to say these things out loud." "Do you still have them?" Jungkook nodded. "All of them." "Was you let me read them?" "Eventually, some are still too raw." Taehyung squeezed his hand. "I'll wait." Jungkook smiled, eyes soft. "You always do." They stayed like that for a long time, the world outside their window fading into night again. Eventually, Jungkook got up, rummaged through his backpack, and returned with a small black notebook. He hesitated for a moment before handing it over. "One," he said, "just one for now." Taehyung opened the notebook slowly, heart racing. His eyes scanned the page, the handwriting familiar but more vulnerable than he'd ever seen. The words bled sincerity, longing, regret, and love. The first line read, "I still check the places you used to sit when I walk into a room." By the time he reached the end of the page, Taehyung's eyes were glassy. He closed the notebook, held it to his chest, and looked at Jungkook with the kind of expression that didn't require translation. "Thank you," he said, voice shaking, "for not giving up." Jungkook stepped forward, resting his forehead against Taehyung's. "Thank you for coming back." They didn't kiss. Not yet, but their closeness now wasn't charged with confusion. It was steady, it was safe, it was earned. In the days that followed, they continued moving through the world as artists, performers, friends, but something deeper pulsed beneath the surface. An understanding, a shared rhythm. At an award show during their encore speech, Jungkook turned to the crowd and said, "Sometimes love is quiet. It doesn't always need to shout. Sometimes it just needs to stay, even when it's hard." Taehyung, standing beside him, reached out and intertwined their fingers for the world to see. The cameras didn't miss it. Neither did the fans. That image, their hands clasped, not as an act but as a declaration, became a symbol for something deeper than any title, any performance. And in the chaos of fame, schedules, cameras, and demands, they kept finding each other. In quiet hotel rooms, in green rooms full of noise, in the spaces between songs. They didn't need to label what they were, they just lived it. Every single day. Together, the photograph went viral within hours. Taehyung and Jungkook, hands intertwined, standing beneath the golden confetti of their encore stage. No choreography, no fan service, just a moment suspended in truth. It wasn't posed, yet it became a symbol. Fans across continents shared it with captions like, "They found their way back," and some silences are made to be held. But for Jungkook and Taehyung, the noise of the outside world barely reached the place they now stood. The backstage after the awards ceremony was a blur of staff applause, stylists racing to pack up costumes, makeup artists dabbing sweat off tired brows. Jungkook was quiet, not from exhaustion, but from a strange sort of calm that settled in his chest like something long exhaled. Taehyung, beside him, hadn't let go of his hand until they were out of the camera's reach. Even now, as they sat on the black leather couch in the waiting area, their knees touched and neither moved away. Jimin walked past, glanced at them, then smirked. "About time," he murmured before stealing a bottle of water and disappearing again. They both laughed, low, breathless. "You think they all knew?" Jungkook asked, wiping his face with a towel. Taehyung stretched his legs out, resting his arms along the back of the couch. "They always knew. They were just waiting for us to admit it." Jungkook leaned back. "What about the company?" Taehyung looked at him sideways, the corners of his lips curling. "Let them figure it out." For the first time in years, it didn't feel like they were hiding. It didn't feel like they were tiptoeing around each other or calculating the risk of being seen too close, too soft, too real. What they had now didn't belong to anyone else's interpretation. Not the fans, not the labels, not even the past versions of themselves that once sabotaged everything out of fear. That night back in their hotel suite, the windows reflected the city lights like stars they could touch. Jungkook stood at the balcony, wind threading through his hair, the afterglow of the stage still etched into his bones. Taehyung came up behind him, wrapped his arms around his waist, and rested his chin on Jungkook's shoulder. "You were brilliant tonight," Taehyung whispered. Jungkook let his hands rest over Taehyung's. "I meant what I said." "I know." A pause. "You looked at me like I was the only one there," Jungkook added. "You were," Taehyung said. And again, the silence between them wasn't absence, it was fullness. They didn't sleep much that night. Not because of intimacy, not in the way people might imagine, but because they stayed up talking. About everything. About the years they lost, the nights they cried into pillows without ever saying why, the way they used to speak in riddles and hope the other would decode it. Taehyung at one point lay on the floor beside the bed, fingers laced with Jungkook, who stayed curled under the sheets. "I was angry," Taehyung said into the dark. "So angry that you didn't fight for me. I was angry you didn't ask me to." They both fell quiet again. "I thought you didn't need me anymore," Jungkook whispered. "And I thought I was too late," Taehyung admitted. "But we were both wrong," Jungkook said, sitting up, "because somehow here we are." Taehyung pulled himself up, resting his head on Jungkook's knee, his voice barely audible. "Here we are." In the days that followed, nothing dramatic changed. There was no press release, no statement, no tell-all, just subtle things. Jungkook placing his hand on the small of Taehyung's back without thinking. Taehyung leaning into Jungkook's side during interviews. Shared glances that lingered just a little longer than before. It was enough, more than enough. But the world noticed. Comments shifted. The speculation returned. But this time it was softer, rooted in hope rather than scandal. The fans didn't ask for confirmation. They gave them space. Some things, after all, were more beautiful when left unnamed. Their bond began to evolve on stage too. During live performances, the choreography between them changed, not drastically but with intention. A hand that once hovered now touched. A look once ignored now held. It was in the way they stood in formation, always angling slightly toward each other like magnets drawn together. Their voices harmonized cleaner, not just musically, but emotionally. Their presence was no longer just two artists performing beside one another. It was something lived. Something honest. And slowly, so slowly, the fear began to fade. One evening, after a particularly long rehearsal, they ended up in the practice room long after the others left. The lights were dimmed, the mirrored walls reflecting only their shadows. Jungkook sat against the wall, sweat dampening his shirt, eyes closed, breathing steady. Taehyung stood in the center of the room, staring at his own reflection, motionless. "You ever wonder," Taehyung said softly, "what it would have been like if we got it right from the start?" Jungkook didn't open his eyes. No. Taehyung turned to him, surprised. "Because if we had," Jungkook said, voice low, "we wouldn't be who we are now. We wouldn't understand the value of this." Taehyung approached slowly, like the room might break if he moved too fast. "And who are we now?" Jungkook opened his eyes, looked up at him. "Survivors." Taehyung crouched in front of him, their faces inches apart. "Lovers." Jungkook reached forward, touched his cheek, thumb brushing under his eye. "If you'll let me be." "I already have," Taehyung breathed. "I did even when I hated you." Jungkook leaned in, and this time when their lips met, it wasn't electric, it was grounding. It wasn't the first kiss of a new love, but the kiss of something that had been buried and found again. Familiar, needed, real. It wasn't passionate, it was reverent. And when they pulled apart, Jungkook rested his forehead against Taehyung's. "Don't let me forget this," he whispered. Taehyung smiled, eyes still closed. "We've lost enough time. I don't plan to forget anything ever again." They stayed in that practice room long into the night, laying side by side on the wooden floor, staring up at the ceiling like they used to when they were barely 20, dreaming of the world. But this time, the world wasn't out there. It was here, between them. In breath, in silence, in love. And when dawn came, they rose. Together, the morning light in Seoul filtered in gently through the high windows of the practice studio, painting the floor in hues of gold and soft amber. Dust particles floated like tiny stars in a slow orbit, dancing between the unmoving figures of Taehyung and Jungkook, who lay side by side on the cool wooden floor. They hadn't spoken in some time, not because there was nothing left to say, but because silence had become a language between them. They listened to the stillness, to their own breathing, to the soft, distant hum of the city rising outside like a heartbeat they no longer had to race against. Jungkook's eyes fluttered open first, lashes brushing his cheek as he slowly turned his head to the side. Taehyung was already watching him. Neither smiled at first, they just looked. There was something raw in that gaze, something new and yet deeply familiar. Jungkook reached over, brushing a piece of hair from Taehyung's face. "You didn't fall asleep." Taehyung blinked slowly. "Didn't want to. I was afraid I'd wake up and find out this didn't happen." Jungkook exhaled a soft breath. "It happened. You're still here. I'm still here." Taehyung's hand reached for his, fingers threading without hesitation. "And this time, we don't run." Jungkook pulled their joined hands toward his chest. "No, no more running." The hours that followed were quiet. They left the studio together, arms brushing as they walked down the back corridor. The halls were empty, too early for staff, too late for night owls, and the silence gave them room to exist without performance, without cameras, without expectations. By the time they reached the elevator, Jungkook reached for Taehyung's wrist, gentle. "Come back with me." Taehyung didn't answer. He didn't need to. They rode the elevator to Jungkook's apartment in silence, the kind of silence that felt like a homecoming. The city outside came alive beyond the windows, but inside there was only stillness. Jungkook dropped his bag near the door, kicked off his shoes, then watched as Taehyung walked in like he had done 1,000 times before, except this time, he didn't carry the ghost of uncertainty with him. Taehyung took in the room. Nothing had changed. The couch still draped with a gray hoodie. The faint smell of detergent from the laundry Jungkook had forgotten to put away. A Polaroid of the group tacked above the kitchen counter. He stepped into the space, breathing it in like memory. "I missed this," he said softly. Jungkook walked past him and opened the fridge, pulling out a bottle of water. "It missed you too." Later, they sat on the couch together, bodies tired, but minds too alert to rest. Taehyung leaned against Jungkook's shoulder, his fingers tracing idle shapes on Jungkook's knee. "Do you think people will notice?" Taehyung asked. Jungkook tilted his head. "They already have." "Is that okay?" Jungkook looked down at him, voice steady. "Do you want to keep hiding?" Taehyung shook his head. "I don't want to hide anymore, but I don't want to be consumed either. I want something real, not just headlines." Jungkook's eyes softened. "Then we make our own story, one no one else gets to write." Taehyung let the words settle before replying. "You always make it sound simple." "It is," Jungkook murmured, "if we're on the same page." They stayed curled on that couch until late afternoon, talking about everything. About music, the pressure of always having to be a version of themselves that fit into someone else's lens. About the ache of performing emotions they no longer felt, and the relief of feeling something that didn't need to be performed at all. At one point, Taehyung reached for the guitar resting in the corner and began strumming softly. The melody was simple, incomplete. Jungkook listened, eyes closed. When the notes faltered, Jungkook hummed a harmony. They built a song like that, wordless, just rhythm and breath and emotion, a shared language only they understood. When evening came, the city turned to gold again, lights flickering across high-rises like fireflies. Jungkook stood at the window, watching the glow. Taehyung came up behind him, wrapping his arms around his waist, forehead pressed against his back. "I don't want this to be temporary," he whispered. "I don't want to go back to pretending." Jungkook reached for his hands, holding them over his heart. "Then don't go." "I mean it, Jungkook." "So do I." In the days that followed, their connection deepened, not in spectacle but in subtle ways. They sat beside each other at meetings and leaned in close to whisper jokes. They began leaving rehearsals together, even if it meant walking slower. Jungkook stopped disappearing after shoots. Taehyung stopped pretending he was fine when he was. It wasn't perfect, they still fought, still had nights when past wounds crept in. But now they stayed, they talked, they faced it. One night Taehyung arrived at Jungkook's door without calling first. His eyes were red, voice hoarse. He didn't explain. He didn't have to. Jungkook opened the door and pulled him inside without a word. They sat on the floor for hours, Jungkook running his fingers through Taehyung's hair as he leaned against him, unraveling slowly. And when Taehyung finally whispered, "I don't know why I'm crying," Jungkook whispered back, "You don't have to." And just like that, another wound healed. They kept their bond quiet, not hidden but protected. They didn't define it for the world. They just lived it, slowly, gently, with the kind of reverence that came only after losing and choosing again. During a fan call event, a fan asked Jungkook what brought him peace these days. He hesitated for only a second, then said softly, "Having someone who knows all your worst moments and still wants to stay." The fan blinked. "You mean Taehyung?" Jungkook smiled. "Yeah, I mean Taehyung." The clip spread like wildfire. Taehyung didn't say anything publicly, but hours later, he posted a photo on his Instagram story. An old Polaroid of the two of them, faded at the corners, taken years ago on a couch in a dressing room, both laughing with their eyes closed. He captioned it with one word, "Still." And everyone knew. The world didn't stop, fame didn't get easier, but through the whirlwind of their lives they had found something anchoring, not an escape, a home. In each other. And that was enough, always. It was raining the next evening. Not a heavy storm, but a steady, quiet drizzle that softened the sounds of the city. Jungkook stood near the window of the dance studio, arms folded, watching the droplets gather on the glass before sliding down in slow trails. Behind him, the speakers still echoed the last track they had rehearsed, but the music felt distant, like something left over from another version of himself, one he no longer wanted to wear. Taehyung entered a few minutes later, shaking his wet hair and laughing under his breath fogging up his glasses. He saw Jungkook near the window and didn't speak right away. Instead, he watched him for a moment, then quietly crossed the room and joined him. They stood shoulder to shoulder, eyes on the blurred lights of the street below. "I like days like this," Taehyung said eventually. "It feels like the city's exhaling." Jungkook turned his head slightly. "Feels like you are too." Taehyung looked at him, surprised by how accurate that was. "I used to be afraid of stillness," he confessed. "I thought if I stopped moving, even for a second, I'd fall behind, that I'd become invisible." "You've never been invisible," Jungkook said softly. "Even in silence, you were the loudest thing in my world." Taehyung's hand brushed against his, intentional now, not seeking approval, just closeness. Behind them, the rain picked up slightly, tapping against the windows like a rhythm only the two of them could hear. The air smelled like linoleum and sweat, but it was comforting, lived in, honest. They turned from the window and without discussing it, they began to dance again. Not with mirrors, not for footage or an audience, just for them. Taehyung moved with his usual fluidity, but there was something new in it now. He wasn't performing grief. He was surrendering to something gentler. Jungkook followed him, each step sinking like muscle memory, like forgiveness mapped out in motion. Their bodies curved into one another, mirroring the unspoken tenderness in their gaze. There was no choreography this time, no expectation, just instinct, just healing. After the music faded, they didn't stop. They stood close, breathing in the stillness they had once run from. "I think we're learning how to stay," Taehyung whispered. Jungkook nodded. "I want to keep learning with you." Taehyung rested his forehead against Jungkook, eyes closed. "Even on the days I'm not easy to love, I'll love you especially then." Taehyung exhaled, something in his chest unclenching. "I think that's the first time I've believed someone when they said that." Jungkook cupped his face gently. "Then let me say it again until you never doubt it." That night, they walked back together under a shared umbrella, bodies pressed close against the cold. The streets were quieter than usual, the world soft and slowed. When they reached the dorm, Jungkook hesitated at the door, glancing up at the sky. Taehyung looked at him. "What is it?" "I think I'm scared," Jungkook admitted. "Not of this, just how much I want it to last." Taehyung placed a hand on his chest over his heart. "Then let's not rush it. Let's build it right this time." Inside, the dorm was dimly lit, the others out for the evening. They changed into warm clothes, feet bare on the hardwood floors, music playing softly in the background. Jungkook sat on the floor beside the coffee table, notebook open in his lap. Taehyung joined him, pulling a blanket around both of them. "What are you writing?" Jungkook hesitated. "Lyrics, maybe, or maybe just thoughts." "Can I hear them?" Jungkook looked down at the page, then began to read, voice steady. "I thought I lost you in the noise. But your silence was the only thing I ever understood. I built 1,000 walls, and you waited outside every one of them, until I remembered how to open the door." Taehyung closed his eyes, heart aching in the most beautiful way. "You wrote that for me." Jungkook nodded, barely audible. "I wrote it because of you." And in that moment, surrounded by the quiet hum of the heater and the soft spill of lamplight, Taehyung leaned in and kissed him. Slow, certain, a kiss made of promises, not apologies. They didn't talk much after that. Words became unnecessary. They fell asleep on the couch, curled together beneath the same blanket, breathing in time. When the others returned hours later and saw them like that, no one said anything. Jimin simply smiled and pulled the door closed quietly.